Let's get into it now. A spoiler-free movie review of Lilo and Stitch, the live-action movie I've been waiting for now for 23 years. Lilo and Stitch is my favorite Disney movie of all time. I went all out. I reverted back to my childhood. At the end of this review, if you're watching on YouTube or if you're only listening on the podcast, you got to go watch it because I got all the exclusive merch to Regal. So I'm going to do a review of my popcorn bucket, which I got the one that looks like Stitch. It is my favorite thing ever now. And there's actually a big story behind it of how Kelsey tracked it down for me. And then we went to go see it in theaters, and I just couldn't help myself to get all this merch because it's all so cute and adorable. So stick around to the end of this review to watch it on YouTube. And if you're only listening to it on the podcast, go to youtube.com/Mike Distro or follow me on TikTok because I'm going to post some stuff over there as well. But let's get into this review. As I said, aside this popcorn bucket for now, which I can't really spoil it. I'm only going to talk about some of the differences that changed it a little bit. But overall, my feeling going into it is I didn't want them to ruin my favorite Disney movie. And I've been critical of live action Disney movies in the past. I've called some of them cash grabs. And then whenever you see your favorite one get made, you see your feelings start to change. And you really see how it's a lot different when it's your favorite movie. What I realized was they had to change a lot of things when adapting it to live action, because when you look at the story of Lilo and Stitch, it's actually quite sad. Lilo loses her parents, and her sister Nani is now her mom. And their relationship has changed because they were really good at being sisters, but now Nani is having to be the mom and the dad taking care of her, trying to keep a job, trying to keep a roof over her head. And Lilo is going through a lot by losing her parents. She also doesn't have friends. And that's all she wants. She just wants to have a friend. She wishes upon a star, which is actually Stitch's spaceship crash landing into Hawaii. And then she meets Stitch. And then Stitch becomes this new force in her life who was designed to destroy, was designed to tear everything up that he came in contact with by Jumba, who was played in this movie by Zach Galifianakis. So overall, they changed things because I realized that story is actually quite sad. When you start seeing this with real life people and you see Lilo as not an animated character, you see how it really kind of talks about people who lose their parents, are being threatened by the state to be taken away from each other. You see it as somebody who is struggling to keep a job and just pay the bills. At the start of the movie, the social worker comes out and sees all the unpaid bills on their table. And you see also how the kids are bullying Lilo, and you're like, man, the story is quite sad here whenever you see it in animated form, even though at its core it's still a sad story, it doesn't really hit the same way because it's a little bit more playful. It's a little bit more fun when the girls are being mean to her. It doesn't cut like a knife quite like it does in a live action movie. But when you hear the girls that Lilo goes to school with being so rude to her, you're like, man, she is really going through a lot right now. So overall, I found the live action version to be a lot more emotional than the animated version. And what it sacrificed a little bit was some of the comedy, because I think a lot of the comedy came from things you can only do in animation that don't translate the same way. One of the things that was very different here is you realize how much violence was used in the original one. One, at the very beginning of the movie, whenever she gets into the altercation with the kids at school, there is a fight. Also, the way that her and her sister communicated and chasing her around the house, you start to think like, man, she really couldn't do that in this movie. That would straight up be child abuse and she would be taken out. Stitch himself is also more destructive and gets into a lot of fights and firefights. So they kind of had to pull away from some of the action and they sacrificed a little bit of the big moments. But what they really emphasized more was that connection between Nani and Lilo and their relationship. That is really what developed more. I think the hardest part was connecting them all back to Stitch. It was almost like Stitch was on his own journey in this movie. And it wasn't really until that third act where him and Lilo really connected. I think that was the hardest part overall that this live action adaptation had, was it is hard to take a child actor and have it connect with something that's not there. And while they do interact, while they do love each other, and while they do become friends like they do in the original, I think the obstacle was meshing those two characters together in the live action version. And if anybody has a problem with this movie, that's probably going to be the biggest thing because it is called Lilo and Stitch. But I just found that that bond together wasn't as strong as it was in the original movie. And I think some of the things had to change, but everything I was looking for was still there. There were other elements of Stitch's emotional development that weren't quite there. So in this, he was a lot more cute and cuddly. And I think Disney was really trying to emphasize that, mainly to sell more merch to people like me, to kids, because he spoke a lot more in this movie. It did emphasize a lot more of his hijinks. And I think overall that was kind of the driving force of, okay, we can't do some of the action that we did in the original because it doesn't quite translate. So let's make him do more funny things. And I think that really worked. Overall, the reason this movie didn't feel like a cash grab to me is because I thought overall the special effects were pretty good because Stitch looked great. He looked adorable. He looked cuddly. I thought it was going to be hard to make him look like an actual alien dog because in the original, you think, man, how could anybody look at Stitch and think that he is a dog, not an alien? I always thought that was the hardest thing to believe in the original. But here, the way they made him look, aside from the fact that he's blue, he does look like a dog and act like a dog. So it was really important to make him look good, make him look like he fit in this world. And I think that was the most important part that they got right. And they made him look good. So the fact that his character design was down, great, even though he lacked a little bit of character development, which is probably asking a lot for a Disney live action movie geared towards kids. Overall, I was really happy with it. And at the end of it, it just made me feel joy. It made me happy. And I think it's because it made me sad at a lot of times. And the actress Maya, who is 7 years old and played Lilo, did a fantastic job because I think that was the hardest thing of not only bringing Stitch to life, but having someone be the real life version of Lilo, and she completely crushed it. And Disney rarely takes risks like this anymore because there are a lot of sequences where it's just Lilo and Stitch on screen. You have a child actor and a CGI character. That is tough to do. And overall, where this movie did not fumble the bag was the emotional scene that we all know and love, the one I have done numerous times on this podcast, which, if for some reason you haven't seen Lilo and Stitch, you haven't heard me talk about this scene posted on TikTok, or heard my interview with Chris Sanders, who is the creator and voice of Stitch, I've talked about this scene a lot. So mild spoiler alert here, even though the original is 20 years old and it is a remake, I feel like we're all okay with this spoiler. But if for some reason you haven't, just skip ahead like 30 seconds right now. But there's a moment when Stitch is going to be taken away and he talks about finding his family. That is my favorite part of the entire movie. It is the most emotional part in the original, and it was still the most emotional part here. And what I noticed by listening to it and watching it, I think they took the audio from the original movie and used it again here because it had the same inflection. Everything about it was the same. I have to imagine Chris Sanders was like, I don't know if I could act it out any better than that. Can we just use that original voice recording and place it into this scene? And it worked perfectly. I was on the verge of tears in that moment, and I was worried for a little bit that they were going to cut it out of the movie and not include it because there was a lot of things that felt like they had to fit into this movie because the original is an hour and 20 minutes. And with them adding more to the story of Nani and Lilo, this one clocked in right under an hour and 40 minutes. But it was there. They nailed it. The thing I did notice is some of the kids in the theater, which I think Kelsey and I were the only adults there without children, they started to get restless around the hour and 10 mark. So I am finding that younger kids do have shorter attention spans. And it is kind of hard to make a movie like this geared towards kids where there is a lot of emotional development that's not just a quick Coco Melon episode. So a little bit I fear for what films are going to be like in the future. And that's not just with kids. I think all of our attention spans are getting shorter and shorter. But that was the only thing I noticed from the audience reaction throughout the movie is about an hour and 10 minutes. People were getting up to go pee. They were like, all right, let's wrap this thing up. We got to get these kids home. But overall, there was very little that I did not enjoy about this. And I was surprised because I haven't liked a lot of the Disney live action movies. But this one was hard to mess up because the story was still there. Stitch looked phenomenal. Lilo was great. Nani was great. David was great. I'm not sure Zach Galifianakis gave it his all in this role, but But aside from that, it was all there for me. So when it comes to rating this, nothing is going to touch the original. The original movie will always be a 5 out of 5. But again, I'm going to have a huge bias here. But for Lilo and Stitch 2025, I give it 4.5 out of 5 pineapples. So if you're only listening on the podcast, the next part is only going to be on YouTube. So you have to go to my YouTube channel to go see me review all the merch I got from Lilo and Stitch at Regal. So here we go. First up, should we save the best for last? Okay, we'll save the best for last. The popcorn bucket is the last one. But what I did get when we went to go see it in theaters, they had the combo, which you get the Stitch ears, which I wore the entire time. I know. I don't even think any other kids in the theater had this thing because honestly, this stuff was expensive and adult money lets you buy stupid things like this. But I believe the combo was $24. Since we're Regal members, we got, I think, 10-15% off. But the combo was the drink, which this is actually a much nicer cup than I was expecting. It is an insulated cup. You see Lilo and Stitch here on the front. You have Stitch here, Ohana. And overall, this is a good cup. Like, I like things with a good weight to it. This has a good weight to it. The ears surprisingly do fit my head, even though I have a big head. And then came with the straw. Straw I didn't bring in here, but it has this topper here where you have Stitch on the beach. You have the ukulele there, surfboards there, and it's the scene whenever he is terrorizing all the sandcastles. So I'll put that up there. But overall, it just looks like the quality here is a lot better than I was expecting. So this is just fun. Like, how is this not fun? How do you not want to drink something out of this all the time? I had to get it because I was like, man, I'm never going to see this in theaters again for the first time. I got to go all out. So this is the popcorn bucket, which, again, I was so obsessed with all the merch that I was looking at every single theater chain and what they had differently. And this is the popcorn bucket with Stitch. On the back, it just says Lilo and Stitch here. Everything else is pretty normal. The only thing about this, it is a lot smaller in here than I was expecting. I thought it was going to be like a big bucket, and maybe it just takes me back to around Christmas time. We would get those big popcorn buckets that had like the 3 different flavors in it. It's overall just kind of like a pail. It's more of a popcorn pail. So if this thing was bigger and held more popcorn, I think it would have been a little bit more worth it. I think the real value here was actually the cup. Like, this was a much nicer cup than I was expecting. The ears are just fun, although will probably be used the least because outside of this, outside of that theater experience, I don't know when else I'm going to wear these, but I will keep all this stuff because I want to remember it. Now, the big boy. The story behind the Stitch popcorn bucket was this was the only piece of merch I wanted. And the thing about big Disney movies like this is you're going to have Disney adults and kids alike want to go buy all this stuff. And we saw that's what people were doing. As soon as it was available, people were going to the theater and buying it. And I was worried it was going to sell out by the time we went because we ended up seeing Mission Impossible on Friday night and wanted to see Lilo and Stitch on Saturday just so we could go to an afternoon showing. And I was going to get it when we went to go see Mission Impossible. That was my plan. But on Thursday, Kelsey surprised me. She went on her lunch break, drove through traffic because she knew how much I wanted it. That this was the only thing I wanted out of all the merch. I kept sending her TikToks of people getting it. And she went to go get it, came back home and surprised me with it. And I probably acted like a 5-year-old in that moment. But this is it. And it was so worth it because look how lifelike it looks. It is so cuddly. And if you actually look at the texture here, it's almost like this velvet felt that he's covered in that makes him look so lifelike. So when she brought it home and surprised me with it, she just had it on the counter in the kitchen. And I thought I was dreaming because it actually looked like Stitch was right there. And the detail on this thing is amazing. Now the price tag, again, that entire combo was $24 with popcorn and a drink inside of it. This was $44.99. So it's not cheap. But if you look at the detail here on the teeth, like they're colored well. Inside the mouth, everything is colored well. And again, that is a hefty price tag. But when you look at the detail on this thing, you may think it looks a little weird because of that texture on the outside of it. But when you have it in your room in person, it just makes it look so much lifelike. Because look at that. On the inside of his leg here, it says Lilo and Stitch. Even has the tail here. And you may think, how is this thing a popcorn bucket? Well, back here, it opens up. So if you look at it, the back here, I don't know that I would put popcorn in this thing because since the outside is that material, you get it all dirty, but there's really not that much space in there. I'm probably going to store some things in there. But overall, this thing just makes me happy. I'm now going to put it in the studio here. Because look at this thing. It's also big. Like, look how big the ears are and detailed. They still have the kind of indentions here for Stitch's ears. The detail on the eyes. The overall just quality and paint on this is fantastic. If I didn't have the disposable income to buy a $44 popcorn bucket, but also I just rarely even get any kind of merch when I go to the theaters. Some of the other things I have in this studio are like just buttons and pins because I never really want to buy the popcorn bucket. But now I have this. It is now a fixture here. And it just kind of feels like you own Stitch because of how big it is. They did have the drinks that were also kind of like this, just a little bit smaller. Not really the same effect because this now feels like I have Stitch in here. So this is the popcorn bucket. This has been my review. I give the Stitch itself a 5 out of 5. No notes. This other popcorn bucket, I love the design of it. A little bit small, so probably a 3.5 out of 5 on the bucket. The ears are pretty solid. I think if you were actually a kid who these are intended for, probably a 3 out of 5 on the ears, just because that's kind of just added on extra. And I think this cup was the most surprising thing. I actually really like this. I'm going to find myself drinking out of it a lot. I like the topper. The cup on itself is nice. I would give the cup a 4 out of 5. So that is my review of all the merch I got from Regal. Me and Stitch are going to go hang out now. All right, that was my review. Bye. Good job. Good job.